When Cherry Blossoms Whisper. Volume 3, Autumn's Unspoken Truth. Chapter 1. Akira's Provocation. The cool autumn air was a sharp contrast to the heat that lingered beneath Haruto's skin. As the first few leaves began to fall, he found himself walking through the school courtyard, hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. The semester was winding down, but things were only heating up for him, Sakura, and the tangled mess of emotions they were yet to untangle. It had been a week since the summer festival, and Sakura seemed more distant than ever. Though she smiled, it was always followed by a quick retreat into herself, hiding behind that wall she built so carefully. Haruto wanted to break through, but something about the way she avoided his eyes made him second-guess his every move. He was on his way to the art room when he spotted her, standing by the window, gazing out at the golden light bathing the school grounds. She looked like a painting, a moment suspended in time, but Haruto couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Before he could approach, a voice broke the silence. Well, if it isn't the artist himself," came Akira's voice, dripping with playful mockery. Haruto froze. Akira Hayami, the flirtatious troublemaker who seemed to always find a way to appear at the worst possible moments, leaned casually against the wall nearby. His signature grin stretched across his face as he observed Haruto with too much amusement. "You're following her around like a puppy," Akira teased, his voice a mix of flirtation and challenge. "Isn't it a little pathetic? Or is it that you can't help but play the hero?" Haruto clenched his jaw, feeling a fire spark in his chest. Akira had always been the kind of guy who knew how to push buttons. And today it seemed like he had made it his mission to provoke him. "What do you want, Akira?" Haruto asked, his tone flat but the tension in his body palpable. Akira didn't seem to mind the cold reception. He sauntered closer, his eyes flicking over to where Sakura stood, still lost in her thoughts. "I want to know why you're always hovering around her. You think you're the only one who can protect her?" Akira's voice dropped, taking on a more serious edge. Haruto felt his muscles tighten. "You think I'm trying to protect her?" he muttered, his eyes narrowing. "She doesn't need protection from me or anyone else." "Oh, really?" Akira's grin faltered, his expression turning more calculating. "You don't think she's been hiding something from you? Something big, something you can't even begin to understand?" A flash of unease shot through Haruto, but he didn't let it show. He stepped forward, closing the space between them. "What are you trying to say, Akira?" Akira tilted his head slightly, as if measuring Haruto. "I'm just saying, maybe you're not the only one who's looking out for her." His voice was laced with a challenge. "I don't know how long you've been playing this hero, but maybe you need to wake up and realize that Sakura's got more going on in her life than you realize." Haruto's heartbeat quickened. He didn't want to let Akira get under his skin, but something about the way he spoke made Haruto feel like he was being tested. Like everything he thought he knew about Sakura, about their relationship, was being called into question. Just as Haruto was about to retort, Sakura turned from the window. Her gaze flicked between Haruto and Akira, confusion clouding her features. Akira, as if sensing an opportunity to rile things up further, shot Haruto one last smirk before winking at Sakura. "Well, looks like your knight in shining armor is busy. Don't let him hold you back, Sakura," Akira said lightly before walking away with that arrogant swagger of his. Sakura didn't say anything, but Haruto noticed the subtle shift in her posture, the way her shoulders tensed. He didn't know what was going on in her head, but he could feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched on until Haruto finally broke it, his voice quieter than before. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes softening as they met hers. Sakura's gaze softened, but her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm fine," she replied, though her words felt hollow. Haruto hesitated, then took a step closer. He wanted to reach out to offer her something, anything that would make the invisible wall between them crumble. But something told him that whatever Akira had said, whatever seed he had planted in Sakura's mind, was going to take more than just words to fix. And Haruto wasn't sure he was ready for what was coming next. Chapter 2: Hospital Visits. The following day was bleak. Clouds hung low in the sky, casting the world in a dull, gray light. It felt like the weather itself had sensed the shift in the air. Haruto couldn't shake the unease that had settled in his chest after his conversation with Akira. Sakura had been quiet, almost distant, and even though she smiled when they spoke, there was something in her eyes that told him she was carrying a heavy burden. But no matter how much Haruto tried to get her to open up, she had always deflected, just like she always did. It wasn't until the end of the school day that Haruto learned just how deep the weight on her shoulders really was. Haruto had been heading toward the gates when he saw Sakura standing by the school's front entrance. Her eyes searching the crowd, her expression tight. She didn't notice him at first, but he saw the moment she spotted him. She quickly straightened, though her gaze flickered to the side as if she were trying to avoid something or someone. "Haruto," she said, her voice quieter than usual. There was an unusual tremor to it, like a crack in her otherwise stoic exterior. He took a few steps toward her. "Hey, everything okay?" His voice was laced with concern, but he didn't push. It was clear she wasn't about to open up yet. She nodded, though it was forced. "Yeah, just something I need to take care of," she muttered. Haruto's instincts told him something was wrong, but he didn't have time to press her further before she continued. "I'm sorry, but I need to leave now. My mom's in the hospital." She said it so casually, but the words hit him like a punch to the gut. His mind raced. "Your mom? What happened?" Sakura hesitated, her hand gripping the strap of her bag tightly. "She collapsed at work today. Overwork, I think. The doctor said she needs rest. But she's stubborn and won't listen to anyone." Her voice was strained, as if she were holding back tears that she refused to shed. Haruto wanted to say something, anything, to make her feel better, but the words stuck in his throat. He had never seen her so vulnerable, and he hated how helpless he felt. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "I'll go with you. You don't have to be alone." Sakura shook her head quickly, her usual wall of detachment snapping back into place. "No, I'll be fine. I don't want you to get involved in this." Her voice faltered on the last sentence, but she quickly covered it up by turning her back to him. But Haruto couldn't just let her walk away like that, not when it was clear she was struggling. He reached out, grabbing her arm gently but firmly, pulling her to a stop. "You don't have to do everything alone, Sakura," he said softly. "Let me help." She stood frozen for a moment, her back to him. The brief silence stretched on until she finally let out a quiet, almost defeated sigh. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Okay, you can come." The ride to the hospital was silent, the air between them thick with the weight of unspoken emotions. Haruto's mind raced, wondering what could be so difficult for Sakura to share. He had thought they were close, but in moments like this, it felt like there was a wall between them that he couldn't scale. When they arrived at the hospital, they found Sakura's mother in a small room, lying in bed with an IV drip attached to her arm. She looked pale, and the sight of her made Haruto's heart clench. Sakura's mother was always so lively and strict, but here, in this sterile room, she looked fragile. Sakura didn't say much as she approached her mother's bedside, sitting down quietly in the chair next to the bed. She reached out, holding her mother's hand with a tenderness Haruto had never seen from her before. It was then that Haruto understood. All this time, Sakura had been carrying the weight of her mother's overwork, the expectations that had been placed on her, and the grief she never allowed herself to feel. The stoic facade she put up, it was all a defense mechanism, something she'd built to survive. As Haruto stood in the doorway, watching Sakura's delicate moment, he finally saw the cracks in her armor, and he realized, for the first time, just how much she needed someone. Someone to hold her up when she was too tired to carry the weight alone. He took a step forward, standing by her side, silently offering his presence, his support. He didn't know if words could make any of this better, but he hoped that just being there by her side was enough. Later that evening, after Sakura had calmed down, Haruto drove her home. She was quieter than before, the rawness of the day settling in her eyes. "I'm sorry you had to see all that," Sakura said softly as they neared her house. "It's not. I don't usually let people see this side of me." Haruto glanced over at her, his gaze soft. "You don't have to apologize," he said quietly. "We all have our moments, and you don't have to go through them alone." For a moment, Sakura seemed to consider his words. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, she finally said, "Thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed someone to be there." Haruto's chest tightened at her admission. "I'll always be here, Sakura. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself." As he dropped her off at her house, he noticed how she lingered for a moment before entering, the weight of the day still clinging to her. But now, there was a crack in her defenses, and Haruto couldn't help but feel like he was finally getting through. Chapter 3, Art versus Poetry. The week following Sakura's hospital visit passed by in a blur. School was a strange, detached routine. Haruto found it hard to focus with the weight of everything he'd learned about Sakura. The image of her quietly holding her mother's hand, her usually composed facade crumbling under the weight of her worries, haunted him. He wanted to do more for her, but for now he could only offer silent support, which he hoped was enough. It was during lunch on Friday that things took a turn. Haruto sat by himself in the courtyard, sketching absent-mindedly in his notebook. The sun was out and the school grounds buzzed with the usual chatter, but Haruto's mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about Sakura, her quiet vulnerability, and how distant she had become since her mother's hospitalization. He didn't expect anyone to approach him, but the familiar voice broke through his thoughts. "Hey, Haruto. You busy?" Kaido plopped down beside him, grinning broadly. Haruto glanced at him, giving a half-hearted smile. "What's up?" Kaido waggled his eyebrows. "Well, I heard there's an art contest happening next week. It's an art versus poetry competition, and guess who's on the poetry team?" He leaned in closer, clearly excited. Haruto raised an eyebrow. "You're in the poetry team?" "Yep," Kaido said with a cocky grin. "Sakura's leading the team, and you know I'm on the winning side. My poetry skills are legendary." Haruto shook his head with a soft chuckle. "You're just in it for the attention, aren't you?" Kaido flashed him a mischievous grin. "What can I say? I've got a flair for the dramatic. But hey, you should totally join the art team. We need someone with real talent, and you're basically the Picasso of our grade." Haruto hesitated, his fingers absently flipping through his sketchbook. He had never been one to compete in something like this. He'd always preferred to keep his art to himself, using it as a private outlet rather than something to showcase. But the thought of joining Sakura's team, of working together in a way that wasn't just passive like before, pulled at him. Before he could respond, Kaido added, "I think it'd be fun. And, you know, Sakura's leading the team, so it'll be a chance to get closer to her. You've got to admit it's a great opportunity." Haruto's thoughts flickered to Sakura. It was true. The competition wasn't just about art or poetry, it was about getting to know her better and maybe helping her in the way she hadn't asked for. "All right," Haruto said, closing his sketchbook and meeting Kaido's gaze. "I'll do it. But only because you've convinced me." Kaido gave him a playful shove. "That's the spirit." The following week, the day of the competition arrived. The atmosphere was charged with excitement. Students were running around, preparing their works and setting up their display booths. Haruto found himself standing in the art room setting up his display with a few of his pieces, mostly abstract sketches, nothing too complex, just enough to capture his feelings. But he couldn't help but notice the tension in the air between him and Sakura. She was sitting at a table with the rest of the poetry team, going over their pieces. Her gaze met his for a moment, and for just an instant he saw something vulnerability, maybe? But it was gone before he could process it. "Haruto." Kaido's voice cut through the tension as he bounced over to him, still full of energy. "You've got to help us out here. They're getting all serious about this poetry stuff, and I need someone to lighten the mood." Haruto gave him an exasperated look. "How about you focus on your own team, Kaido?" But Kaido ignored him, dragging him over to where Sakura sat with Rin and a few other students. Sakura looked up as Haruto approached, her expression still as unreadable as ever, though her eyes softened just slightly when they met his. "You're here," she said, the hint of surprise in her voice. "I didn't expect you to actually show up." Haruto shrugged, a bit self-conscious. "I said I would, didn't I?" Sakura nodded but didn't say much else. The silence stretched between them as Kaido made his usual attempt to break the ice, reciting some overly dramatic poem he'd come up with. Haruto couldn't help but smile at how ridiculous Kaido could be. But then, without warning, Rin, Sakura's rival from the literature club, stood up. Her sharp gaze landed on Haruto, and Haruto immediately recognized the challenge in her eyes. "So," Rin began, crossing her arms, "I guess we'll see who's better, huh? Art or poetry?" Haruto frowned, caught off guard. "It's not a competition," he said. "Art and poetry are both ways of expressing yourself." Rin's lips curled into a small, condescending smile. "That's sweet, Haruto, but I'm talking about winning. And poetry is a language of the soul, while art is, well, it's just pictures." Sakura, who had been quiet the entire time, finally spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "Art is an extension of emotion, just like poetry. There's no need to belittle one over the other." Haruto looked at her in surprise. For once, she was standing up for someone other than herself. And it made him feel closer to her. Like maybe she wasn't as emotionally distant as she seemed. Rin shot Sakura a pointed look but didn't reply, instead walking away to finish her preparations. "Thanks," Haruto said quietly, not sure what else to say. Sakura just nodded, her usual walls still in place, but there was a flicker in her gaze that he couldn't quite read. He wanted to ask her about it, but with the competition looming, now wasn't the time. The competition started soon after, and the tension between the two teams was palpable. Sakura and Haruto stood side by side as their respective displays were evaluated by the judges. Sakura's poetry was raw, full of emotion, but it was clear that the weight of her family's situation had bled into her words. Haruto's art, on the other hand, was subtle, almost abstract, but it captured a different kind of vulnerability. In the end, their team didn't win. But Haruto realized something more important: this competition wasn't about victory. It was about understanding each other, about expressing emotions that they otherwise kept hidden. As the day ended, Haruto found himself standing next to Sakura again, the final results announced in the background. She was staring at her poetry display, the small victory in her eyes slowly fading. "You did well," Haruto said quietly, his voice carrying a warmth that he didn't even realize he was capable of showing. Sakura turned to him, her eyes softening. "Thanks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, they stood there, neither speaking, just existing in the space they'd created together. And for once, Haruto didn't feel the need to break the silence. He was content just being there, standing beside her. Chapter 4: Rooftop Confrontation. The days after the art versus poetry competition passed in a whirl of emotions. Haruto couldn't shake the feeling that something was different between him and Sakura. The brief moments they shared, whether it was the quiet exchange of glances during the competition or her subtle defense of him, made him wonder if there was more to their connection than just mutual understanding. But despite these fleeting moments, the walls that Sakura had so carefully built remained intact, and Haruto felt that distance once again. It wasn't until a week later that the situation came to a head. It started with Akira. Haruto hadn't expected to see him again so soon after the competition, but Akira's usual, carefree grin appeared during lunch on Friday, as if he had never left. He sauntered up to Haruto and Sakura, leaning casually against the doorframe where the two of them were seated at their usual lunch spot. "Hey, you two," Akira said with a playful glint in his eyes. "Having fun, are we?" Haruto narrowed his eyes. "What do you want, Akira?" Akira glanced at Haruto, then shifted his gaze to Sakura, who had been unusually quiet. "Oh, just checking in on you guys," he said, his smile wide. "I heard some interesting things after the competition." His eyes glinted with mischief. "I heard you two were getting pretty close. Maybe too close." Sakura stiffened, her fingers tightening around her lunchbox. Haruto could see the slight tension in her jaw, the subtle signs that Akira's teasing was getting under her skin. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sakura said, her voice calm but the slight tremor in it betraying her discomfort. Haruto stood up, stepping in front of her protectively. "Knock it off, Akira. We don't need your crap." Akira raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "What's the matter, Sakura? Feeling protective?" "Don't worry, I'm just having a bit of fun." His tone was light, but there was something unsettling in the way he was looking at Sakura. Haruto's chest tightened with the feeling that Akira wasn't just teasing, he was pushing. Testing something. His gaze darted to Sakura's face, watching her every reaction. Sakura, for her part, remained silent, her lips pressed together tightly. Haruto could tell she was trying to keep calm, trying not to react. But the more Akira pushed, the more it seemed like the cracks in her composure were growing. Then, Akira leaned forward, his voice dropping in volume as he spoke directly to Sakura. "You know, it's strange. You've been acting so distant lately. Like you don't care about anything. But then, this guy," Akira gestured at Haruto, "shows up, and suddenly you're opening up. It's funny, don't you think?" The words were like a slap to the face, and Haruto felt something inside him snap. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Don't talk to her like that." Akira's grin widened, but his eyes were cold. "Oh, I get it. You're the knight in shining armor now. How cute." He straightened up, his tone turning mocking. "But you're not fooling anyone. I know why you're doing this. You think you're the only one who can help her, right? But the truth is, she's never going to let you in." Haruto's heart pounded in his chest as Akira's words hit harder than expected. But before he could respond, something inside him shifted. Maybe it was the frustration of the last few weeks, the tension, the silence, but Haruto didn't want to take this anymore. Not from Akira, not from anyone. "Shut up," Haruto muttered under his breath, barely holding back his anger. "I'm not going to let you mock her like this. You don't get to do that." Akira leaned in, his smile turning into something darker. "You're just a kid playing at being her savior. You can't protect her from everything. Haruto clenched his fists, his body shaking with anger. Don't talk about her like that. You have no idea what she's going through. She doesn't need you, Akira. Not now, not ever. The last sentence barely left his mouth when, without thinking, he shoved Akira away, the force behind the push surprising even him. Akira stumbled back, glaring, the amusement in his eyes gone. Don't ever talk about Sakura like that again, Haruto hissed through gritted teeth. He could feel his breath coming in short bursts, his heart hammering in his chest. For a long moment, there was silence. The tension hung in the air thickly, and Haruto could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He was aware of Sakura standing behind him, her presence as heavy as the air around them. Finally, Akira's expression softened, but not in the way Haruto had expected. He raised his hands in mock surrender, a crooked grin tugging at his lips. All right. No need to get so worked up. He turned to Sakura, his voice softening slightly. I just don't want to see you hurt, that's all. Haruto's anger flared again, but before he could say anything, Sakura spoke. It's not your business, she said coldly, her voice steady and firm. You're not the one who decides what's best for me. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Akira's eyes narrowed as he took a step back, his earlier confidence waning under the force of her response. Fine, he muttered, turning away with a dismissive flick of his hand. But don't say I didn't warn you. As Akira left the courtyard, Haruto remained where he was, still tense, still angry. He turned around slowly to find Sakura standing just behind him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, Sakura broke the silence. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice soft but genuine. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stepped in. Haruto looked at her, his heart still pounding, but this time not from anger. I couldn't just stand there and let him say those things. Not about you. Sakura blinked, her eyes flickering for a brief moment before she looked down. I don't need anyone to protect me, she said, her voice a little too sharp. I can handle it. Haruto watched her carefully, sensing the defensiveness in her tone. But instead of pushing her, he simply nodded. I know you can. But sometimes it's okay to let others help. Sakura didn't respond, but the quiet shift in her demeanor told him everything he needed to know. There was something there, something that neither of them had fully understood yet, but they were slowly getting closer to unravel. Chapter 5, Midnight Escape. The air was cool that night, a soft breeze fluttering through the trees on the school campus. Haruto found himself unable to sleep, his mind still whirling from the confrontation with Akira earlier that day. He had tried to push away the thoughts, but they lingered, gnawing at him. Sakura's words kept echoing in his mind. I can handle it. She said it so confidently, but Haruto could tell there was more to it. More that she wasn't letting him see. He sighed, running a hand through his messy hair as he sat on his bed, staring out the window at the dark sky. It was quiet, too quiet. And despite everything, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Meanwhile, across town, Sakura was also restless. After the drama with Akira, she had retreated to her room as was her habit when she needed to think. But tonight was different. Tonight, the silence felt suffocating. She sat at her desk, scribbling absent-mindedly in her notebook, the words of her latest poem failing to come together. She had always found solace in writing, in capturing her emotions through words. But tonight, it seemed impossible to express anything. She felt trapped in a world that was slowly slipping away from her grasp. The thought of her mother's exhaustion, her father's absence, and the mounting pressure from everyone around her weighed heavily on her heart. But even more than that, there was a fear she couldn't escape, the fear that no matter how hard she tried to keep everyone at arm's length, she would still end up disappointing them. Sakura stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She couldn't take it anymore. The suffocating pressure. The unspoken expectations. It all felt too much. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat, slipped out of her window, and disappeared into the night. Haruto was startled when his phone buzzed in the middle of the night. He groggily reached for it, only to see a message from Sakura's number. His heart skipped a beat, a sudden unease crawling over him. Sakura, I need to get away. Don't follow me. The message was simple, but the implications were clear. Something was wrong. He didn't hesitate for a second. Without thinking, he grabbed his jacket, hurriedly put on his shoes, and left his room. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he ran through the dark streets, the cold air biting at his skin, his breath coming in quick bursts. Where was she going? Why had she left? Sakura moved through the streets like a ghost, her footsteps soft but purposeful. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. She needed to get away from the world for a while, to breathe without feeling the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her. She found herself on the platform of a quiet train station. The area was deserted at this hour, save for a few late-night commuters. She sat on one of the benches looking at the tracks as the sound of the trains echoing in the distance filled the silence. It was only when she felt a familiar presence that her heart skipped a beat. "Haruto!" "Sakura," he called out softly, his voice filled with concern. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the ground. She couldn't face him. Not now. Not when she was so afraid of what would happen if she let him in. But Haruto didn't give up. He walked over to her, sitting down beside her on the bench. "You can't just run away, Sakura." Sakura stiffened, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she kept her eyes averted, as though pretending he wasn't there would somehow make this moment easier to bear. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like everything is slipping out of my hands." Haruto watched her, his heart aching for her. "You don't have to do everything on your own. You don't have to keep pretending like you're fine." Sakura's lips trembled, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself show her vulnerability. She wasn't the perfect, stoic Sakura that everyone saw. She was just a girl who had been holding everything together for too long, too scared to let go. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice shaking. "Scared that if I let anyone in, I'll disappoint them. Scared that if I let myself feel, I'll lose everything." Haruto reached out slowly, gently placing his hand on hers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her heart skip a beat. "Sakura, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do this alone." For a long moment, the two of them sat there in silence, the only sound the distant hum of the train tracks. The weight of everything between them seemed to lift just a little, like the first breath of fresh air after being underwater for too long. Sakura finally looked up at him, her eyes softening. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to know right now," Haruto said quietly, his voice steady. "But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." Sakura felt something shift inside her, a small but significant crack in the walls she had built around herself. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let someone in. As the train pulled into the station, Sakura looked up at Haruto. She wasn't sure what the future held or if she was ready for whatever it was. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she didn't have to face it alone. With a hesitant smile, she nodded. "Okay." Haruto smiled back, a quiet understanding passing between them. No more walls, no more pretending. They were both ready to take the next step. Chapter 6: The Broken Promise. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft beams of light across the room. Haruto sat at his desk, his mind still racing from the events of last night. Sakura's words echoed in his mind, "I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared." The vulnerability in her eyes haunted him, and though they had shared a moment of connection, he knew that the road ahead wouldn't be as easy as it seemed. He couldn't stop thinking about her, how she looked in the quiet of the train station, her walls crumbling just enough for him to see the fear lurking behind her strong facade. She had made a promise to herself to handle everything alone, but now it seemed that promise was breaking, piece by piece. Haruto ran a hand through his hair, leaning back in his chair. "How do you help someone who's afraid to let you in?" Sakura, on the other hand, hadn't slept much either. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, lost in her thoughts. The memory of last night played on a loop in her mind. Haruto's words had been like a lifeline, something she hadn't realized she needed until it was offered. "You don't have to do this alone." But the lingering fear remained. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to let go of the control she had so carefully maintained for so long? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to push away the rising tide of emotions. Her mother's exhaustion, the pressure to be perfect, and the fear of disappointing everyone were too much to carry. "Maybe it's better if I don't get too close. Maybe it's safer to keep my distance." The next day at school was strangely quiet, almost as if everyone was holding their breath. Haruto found himself avoiding Sakura, unsure of how to act after their late-night conversation. The unspoken words between them hung in the air, and he didn't know how to bridge the gap. Meanwhile, Sakura felt the weight of her decision to push Haruto away looming over her. She hadn't told him everything about studying abroad, she thought bitterly. The scholarship she had been secretly considering, the opportunity to leave Japan and escape from the pressures that suffocated her. It was her escape plan, her way of finding control again. But after last night, she wasn't sure anymore. Her heart ached at the thought of leaving Haruto behind, leaving everything behind. But staying, letting herself be vulnerable, meant facing everything she had avoided. Could she truly open herself up to him? Could she live up to the expectations of her family? Would it even matter in the end? Sakura found herself staring at her phone, her fingers hovering over the keys. She had drafted a message to Haruto several times, but each time she erased it. The words weren't right. There was too much she couldn't say. That afternoon, during lunch, Haruto sat alone at his usual spot, absent-mindedly poking at his food. He knew he should reach out to her, he should ask her if she was okay, if she wanted to talk. But something held him back. He wasn't sure if it was fear of pushing too hard or fear of hearing something he didn't want to hear. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. Haruto. He looked up to see Sakura standing in front of him, her expression unreadable. Hey, he greeted softly, trying to keep his voice steady. Sakura hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from him. There was an odd tension in the air, a distance between them that hadn't been there before. For a moment, neither of them spoke, both of them caught in their own thoughts. Finally, Sakura spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you. Haruto raised an eyebrow, nodding. Of course. Sakura took a deep breath as if gathering her thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about last night and about everything I've been hiding. Haruto listened carefully, his eyes softening as he watched her. I've been avoiding it for so long, and I thought if I just kept everything in, I could manage it. But it's been too much. I feel like I'm drowning, Haruto. Her voice broke slightly and she quickly looked away, fighting to keep her composure. I've been thinking about leaving. About studying abroad. I don't know what to do anymore. Haruto felt his heart tighten. He could hear the desperation in her voice, the same fear and uncertainty he had seen in her eyes last night. But now he understood it better. You don't have to do this alone, Sakura, he said quietly, his voice firm but gentle. You don't have to leave. You don't have to run away. Sakura looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of doubt and longing. But what if staying hurts even more? What if I can't live up to everything I'm supposed to be? Haruto reached across the table, his hand hovering just above hers. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. And I'll be here, whatever you decide. She looked down at his hand, her breath catching in her throat. She had always kept everyone at a distance, but now, with Haruto's words hanging in the air, it felt like something inside her was cracking open. It was scary, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe it was okay to be vulnerable. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Haruto squeezed her hand gently, a silent promise. You don't have to figure it out alone. As they sat there in silence, an unspoken promise passed between them. Sakura knew that she still had a lot to work through, but for the first time, she didn't feel quite as alone. Haruto had broken down some of the walls she had built around herself, and in doing so, he had shown her that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to trust, to lean on someone else. And while she didn't have all the answers yet, Sakura knew that she couldn't push him away anymore. Not when he was offering her something so rare. His understanding, his patience, and his willingness to walk beside her, no matter where the path led. Chapter 7, Kaido's Redemption. The school hallways felt unusually empty as Haruto walked to his next class. His thoughts still lingered on the conversation with Sakura. The raw vulnerability she had shown him last night had shaken him in a way he hadn't expected. Yet, as much as he wanted to help her, he knew the journey ahead would be more complicated than he initially thought. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his thoughts. It was a message from Kaido. Meet me at the ramen shop after school. Got something to show you. Haruto couldn't help but sigh. Kaido was never one to be subtle, but the fact that he wanted to meet him at the ramen shop seemed like a sign of something serious. After school, Haruto made his way to the small, hole-in-the-wall ramen shop that Kaido's family had run for years. It had always been a place of chaos, loud voices, and the constant smell of simmering broth. Today, however, it felt quieter than usual. The shop was almost empty, save for Kaido sitting in the back booth, scribbling on a piece of paper. Kaido, what's going on? Haruto asked as he slid into the booth across from his friend. Kaido glanced up, his usual chaotic energy toned down. You won't believe it, man, he said, his voice serious. I think I've figured something out. Something I've been avoiding for a long time. Haruto raised an eyebrow. This was new. Kaido was always the carefree, impulsive friend, never the type to get serious about anything. Haruto folded his arms, waiting for Kaido to explain. I'm talking about the ramen shop, Kaido continued, leaning forward. You know how my family's been struggling with it, right? Mom's been working herself to the bone, and we've been trying to keep the place afloat. But it's not enough. So I've been writing about it. I've been writing reviews for ramen shops in the area. It's been getting attention. Haruto blinked. Wait, you're writing reviews? Kaido nodded, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of pride and guilt. Yeah, it started as a joke, but the reviews are actually going viral. People are noticing. And guess what? I got an offer from a food blogger to write for their site. It could mean a lot for us. Haruto leaned back in the booth, processing the information. Kaido, that's incredible. You're actually helping the shop get attention. Kaido's face softened, his usual brashness fading into something more vulnerable. It's not just that. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about my family, about me. I've been selfish, Haruto. I've been hiding behind jokes and messing around. But now it's time to step up. I can't keep pretending I don't care. Haruto watched as Kaido's words sank in. The chaotic, impulsive Kaido he knew was still there, but now there was a sense of responsibility in his voice that hadn't been there before. It was a side of him Haruto hadn't seen in a while. Damn, Haruto muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. I didn't think you had it in you. Kaido laughed, a little sheepish. Neither did I. But I think I need to start taking things seriously. Not just the ramen shop, but my life too. Haruto smiled. Well, you've already made the first step. And hey, if you need help, whether with the ramen shop or anything else, I've got your back. Kaido gave him a grateful look. Thanks, Haruto. I'm glad you're here. The conversation lingered in Haruto's mind for the rest of the evening. It wasn't just Kaido's redemption that struck him, but the realization that everyone around him was growing. Sakura was fighting her own battles, and now Kaido was stepping up for his family. Haruto couldn't help but wonder if he, too, needed to start taking things more seriously. After all, life was moving forward, whether he was ready or not. But it wasn't just his friends who were changing. Haruto could feel something shifting within himself as well. Maybe it was time to face the things he had been avoiding, his own fears, his emotions, and the way he had been keeping himself at arm's length from everyone. The next morning, Haruto found himself walking into school with a renewed sense of purpose. He spotted Kaido in the hallway, grinning from ear to ear. His usual energy was back, but there was a confidence to him now that Haruto hadn't seen before. Ready for another day? Kaido asked with a wink. Haruto smiled back, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. Yeah, let's do this. But as they walked toward their classroom, Haruto couldn't shake the feeling that something more was waiting for him, something bigger than just the battles his friends were fighting. And in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder if he was finally ready to face his own. Chapter 8. Cultural Festival Tears. The school buzzed with excitement as the cultural festival drew near. Everywhere Haruto looked, he saw students practicing, preparing booths, and putting final touches on their exhibits. It was a welcome distraction from the growing tension that had lingered over him and Sakura in recent weeks. Their conversations had been growing more serious, and Haruto couldn't ignore the deepening feelings he had for her. Yet there was still a barrier between them. Sakura's constant struggle to stay composed, her perfectionist nature, her stoic demeanor, still kept Haruto at arm's length. He wanted to reach her, to understand her better, but every time they got close, she pulled away. The cultural festival, a time for celebration and light-hearted fun, seemed like the perfect opportunity to break through that barrier. Are you nervous about the contest? Kaido asked, leaning against the wall next to Haruto, who was absent-mindedly tracing patterns in the air with his finger. The school's art contest was just one of many events during the festival, but it felt significant to both him and Sakura. They'd decided to work together for the competition, art and poetry combined. Not nervous, Haruto replied, glancing at the poster for the contest. Just a bit unsure. I know we've been working hard, but I feel like there's a lot riding on this. Yeah, I get it, Kaido said with a grin. But come on, you've got this. Just relax. If anything, it's all about enjoying the process. Haruto managed a faint smile. He appreciated Kaido's optimism, even though it didn't fully lift the weight on his shoulders. As the festival day arrived, the school was alive with energy. Haruto and Sakura had set up their exhibit in the main hall, a blend of Sakura's poignant poetry and Haruto's abstract art. The pieces were meant to complement each other, a visual reflection of the words, and vice versa. They had worked tirelessly, but something felt off in the air between them. As much as they'd grown closer, the unspoken tension between them remained. The opening ceremony had ended and now the contest was about to begin. Haruto stood in front of their display, adjusting a few frames nervously. Sakura, as usual, was quiet, her gaze fixed on the floor as she fiddled with her hands. She looked beautiful, her expression intense as she concentrated on the small details, but Haruto could tell she was lost in her own thoughts. Hey, Haruto said softly, his voice barely audible amidst the noise of the festival. It'll be fine, right? Sakura looked up at him, her eyes unreadable. It should be. We've done our best. There was a moment of silence before she spoke again, her voice shaky. Haruto, do you ever feel like no matter how hard you try, it's never enough? The words were simple, but they cut through Haruto like a knife. He turned to look at her, finding her face filled with a quiet sadness he hadn't noticed before. He stepped closer, his gaze softening. Sakura, you've given everything to this. And you've made something beautiful. It's more than enough. Sakura bit her lip, her eyes flickering with the uncertainty she rarely let show. I just don't want to disappoint anyone. Not you, not my mom, not myself. Before Haruto could respond, there was a sudden commotion at the far end of the room. He turned only to see Akira approaching their booth, a mischievous glint in his eye. Well, Akira said with a smirk, eyeing the art display with an exaggerated appraisal. I have to say, I'm surprised. You two make a pretty good team. Too bad it won't be enough to win. Haruto's hand clenched into a fist, but he forced himself to remain calm. Akira was always trying to provoke him to get under his skin. But this time he wasn't going to let it happen. What are you doing here, Akira? Haruto asked, his voice steady despite the irritation bubbling inside. I'm just here to admire your work. You know, art and poetry, it's a nice little combination, Akira replied, but there was a sharpness in his tone now. But it's all just a bunch of pretty words and pictures. The real question is, can you handle the pressure when it really matters? Sakura stiffened beside Haruto, clearly uncomfortable with Akira's presence. Haruto could see the subtle way her shoulders tightened, a sign that the insults were getting to her more than she let on. Akira, please leave, Sakura said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not interested in your opinion. Akira tilted his head, clearly enjoying the reaction he was provoking. Not interested? I think you are. Maybe you just don't want to admit it. He leaned in a little closer, his eyes now locking onto Sakura's with a challenging glint. You're not as perfect as you think you are, Sakura. Everyone has their flaws. Haruto stepped forward, instinctively placing himself between Akira and Sakura, his body rigid with anger. Enough, Akira. Don't push her. You're not getting under her skin. But Akira only smiled wider. Am I not? Or maybe you're just trying to protect her from the truth. Before Haruto could respond, there was a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Sakura, her eyes now brimming with tears, stepped forward, breaking the tense moment. Akira, just go, she said, her voice shaking. You don't know anything. Haruto's heart clenched as he saw the tears beginning to fall from Sakura's eyes. Her composure, the mask she wore so carefully, was starting to crack. It was clear that Akira's words had hit a nerve. Akira's smirk faded, and for the first time, he looked almost guilty. He stood still for a moment before turning and walking away without another word. Sakura stood there, her face pale as she wiped her tears away hastily. Haruto stood by her side, unsure of what to do or say. He felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her, but the tension in the air was thick. I'm sorry, Sakura whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't want you to see me like this. Haruto placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. Sakura, you don't have to apologize. You don't have to be perfect all the time. Sakura's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Haruto saw the vulnerability she had been hiding. The weight of her emotions seemed to be overwhelming her, and Haruto could feel it, too. They had been through so much together, but this was different. The pressure, the expectations, the fear of letting everyone down. It was all too much. And yet, in that moment, Haruto realized something. He didn't have all the answers, but he was here for her no matter what. The rest of the festival passed by in a blur. Their joint exhibit had won first place, but neither of them seemed to care about the trophy. Sakura had pulled herself together, though her quiet sobs lingered in Haruto's mind. He knew there was more to her pain than what she had revealed, but he also knew that, little by little, they would get there. Together. As the festival ended, Haruto walked Sakura to the gates, both of them lost in their thoughts. The night air was cool and the stars twinkled above them. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was an understanding, a shared moment of emotional release. Sakura looked at him, her voice soft but steady. Thank you, Haruto. For being here. For not giving up on me. Haruto smiled, his heart full as he met her gaze. I'll never give up on you, Sakura. Not now, not ever. Chapter 9, Scarf Secrets. The days after the cultural festival were filled with a strange mix of triumph and lingering sorrow. Haruto and Sakura had won the contest, yet the victory felt hollow to both of them. Sakura had managed to regain her composure after the emotional breakdown, but the heavy weight of her past still lingered, quietly suffocating her. Haruto could sense it even when she smiled, even when she laughed. But he wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. It was a crisp afternoon in early November when Sakura handed him the scarf. It wasn't a special occasion, nor was there any grand gesture behind it. But as Haruto was about to leave school for the day, Sakura appeared at his side, holding out a small, neatly folded scarf. It was simple, light pink, almost the same shade as her hair, yet there was something about it that felt significant. "Here," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Take it. You might need it." Haruto blinked, taking the scarf from her with a confused look on his face. "What's this for?" Sakura glanced away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. It's getting colder, and I thought it might help. You've been walking home late sometimes, and you don't always wear something warm." Haruto smiled gently, touched by her thoughtfulness. But it was more than just a scarf. He could feel that the gesture was about something deeper, something she wasn't ready to say aloud. "Thanks, Sakura," Haruto said, wrapping the scarf around his neck. It was soft against his skin, and for a brief moment it felt like an invisible bond tying them together. "You're welcome," she replied, though her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Just stay warm." As Haruto adjusted the scarf, he noticed something odd. A small piece of paper was tucked into the folds. It was a thin, folded note. Sakura quickly turned and started walking away, but Haruto caught up to her and gently stopped her. "Wait. There's something in the scarf," Haruto said, unfolding the note. Sakura froze, her eyes widening in alarm as she tried to take it back. "No, don't." But it was too late. Haruto had already read the note. The words were simple, but they hit him like a wave. "Stay warm while I'm gone." The message wasn't just a casual remark about the scarf, it felt like something deeper, something that revealed a hidden truth. "Sakura," Haruto started, his voice hesitant. "What's this about?" Sakura's expression faltered for a split second before she regained her composure. She turned to face him, her eyes full of emotions she wasn't ready to share. "It's nothing. I just wanted you to know that I care." But Haruto could see through the mask she was wearing. "Is this about you leaving?" he asked gently, knowing that it was the question that had been hanging in the air between them for weeks now. Sakura's gaze dropped, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. She paused, trying to steady herself. "I'm planning to study abroad." The words were simple, but they hit Haruto like a blow to the chest. He had suspected it, but hearing it out loud made the reality feel unbearable. "Study abroad," Haruto repeated softly, his heart sinking. He swallowed hard, trying to process the words. "When?" "Soon," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you yet, but I can't keep it a secret. I don't want to hurt you." Haruto stood frozen, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. He had known something was off. Sakura had been distant, and her emotions had been all over the place. But this was different. This was the truth she had been hiding. "I don't want you to go," Haruto said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to lose you." Sakura's eyes softened, but she shook her head. "It's not about that, Haruto. It's something I need to do. I need to find my own path, to figure out who I really am." Haruto's heart ached at her words. He could feel the distance between them widening, a gap that no amount of closeness could close. But even in the face of this, he wasn't ready to give up. "You don't have to go," Haruto said firmly, stepping closer to her. "You don't have to figure it out alone. We can figure it out together." Sakura hesitated, her gaze flickering between him and the ground. "I'm scared, Haruto. I'm scared that if I stay, I'll keep holding you back. I don't know how to make things right." Haruto reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. "You're not holding me back. You never have been." The air between them was charged with unspoken words, with emotions they had both been keeping locked inside. Haruto knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that he wasn't going to let her go. Not like this. That evening, as Haruto walked home, the scarf wrapped around his neck felt heavier than it ever had before. The note in his pocket seemed to burn with the weight of its meaning. "Stay warm while I'm gone." What was Sakura trying to tell him? Was she preparing herself to leave, preparing herself to say goodbye? He couldn't let that happen. Not without a fight. The next day at school, the air was thick with tension. Haruto found himself staring at the empty chair beside him in class, where Sakura had once sat so comfortably. She had stopped coming to school for the past couple of days, citing personal matters. Haruto didn't buy it. He knew something was wrong, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized he needed to act before it was too late. Chapter 10, Ms. Hara's Advice. The day after Sakura's confession about studying abroad, Haruto couldn't focus on anything. His mind kept replaying the note she had left him, the one that seemed to echo the emotions she wasn't willing to voice directly. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something important, something he couldn't afford to ignore. It was during their literature class that Haruto found himself sitting in front of Ms. Fuyumihara, the stern literature teacher who had been a quiet mentor to Sakura. Her classroom was dim, filled with the scent of old books and quiet, whispered words of wisdom. Haruto had stayed after class, his thoughts too heavy to concentrate on poetry or essays. Ms. Hara, noticing his troubled expression, had asked him to stay behind for a moment. It wasn't unusual, the literature teacher had a way of sensing when something was amiss in her students' lives. She had always been more than a teacher to Sakura. Someone who understood the complex layers of the girl's emotions, which were often buried beneath the mask of perfection. As Haruto sat across from her, his fingers nervously traced the edge of the desk. Ms. Hara adjusted her glasses and fixed him with a steady gaze, her usual sternness softened by an underlying warmth. "You're troubled," she said simply, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "And I can see that you're not one to share your burdens easily. But it's important that you talk about them, Haruto. You've been carrying something for a while, haven't you?" Haruto hesitated, unsure of how to begin. He had never been one to openly discuss his feelings, not even with his closest friends. But somehow, in the quiet solitude of Ms. Hara's office, it felt as if there was no other choice. Sakura, Haruto began, his voice barely a whisper. "She's planning to study abroad. She's leaving soon and I don't know what to do. I don't want her to go." Ms. Hara's expression softened, her eyes betraying a hint of understanding. Sakura's always been good at hiding her emotions, but she's never been good at hiding her guilt. She carries it like a shadow, always thinking she's not enough, that she's holding others back. Haruto nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was true. Sakura's constant need for perfection, her stoic demeanor, it was all a shield. And beneath that shield, Haruto could see the vulnerability she was so desperately trying to hide. "She doesn't believe she deserves to be happy," Haruto murmured, more to himself than to Ms. Hara. "She's afraid that if she stays here, she'll drag me down with her." Ms. Hara smiled faintly, her gaze turning thoughtful. "Love is complicated, Haruto. It's not just about the good moments, the moments of joy and laughter. It's about being there for someone through their darkest times, even when they think they don't deserve it. Sometimes we feel we have to let go of what we love in order to protect it. But in doing so, we only end up creating more distance." Haruto met her gaze, the weight of her words pressing on him like an invisible hand. "But what if? What if she's right? What if I'm holding her back? What if I can't be the person she needs me to be?" Ms. Hara leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping gently on the desk. "I don't think you're holding her back, Haruto. But I do think you both need to understand that love doesn't work by holding on tight. Sometimes it's about letting the other person go, even if it hurts. But in that moment, you also have to trust that if you truly love someone, they'll come back to you when they're ready." She paused for a moment, watching Haruto closely. "And if you're truly in love with Sakura, you'll fight for her. But not in a way that drags her back into something she's not ready for. It's about understanding her, knowing her heart, and giving her the space she needs." Haruto felt a shift within himself. Ms. Hara's words weren't the kind of advice he'd expected to hear, but they made sense. Sakura wasn't leaving because she didn't care. She was leaving because she thought that's what was best for both of them. But he couldn't let her go without making her understand that he was there, ready to face whatever came next, together. I don't know if I'm ready to let go," Haruto admitted, his voice shaky. "But I want to be there for her. I don't want her to think that she's alone in this." Ms. Hara smiled, a hint of approval in her expression. "Then don't let her think she's alone. But also remember that sometimes letting her go doesn't mean giving up. It means showing her that you're willing to stand by her, no matter the distance." As Haruto left the classroom, his mind was clearer than it had been in days. Ms. Hara's advice had opened his eyes to something he had been avoiding, the fact that sometimes love required both sacrifice and patience. He didn't know if Sakura would stay or if she'd follow through with her plans to leave. But he knew one thing for certain, he wasn't going to stop fighting for her. As he walked down the hallway, Haruto found himself more determined than ever. Sakura's departure wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new, something they'd have to navigate together no matter where life took them. Chapter 11. Winter's First Snow. The first snowfall of winter came quietly, blanketing the school grounds in soft, delicate white. The morning air was sharp, carrying the promise of the cold season, but there was something peaceful about it. Haruto stood at the window of the classroom, watching as the snowflakes drifted down like tiny stars. His thoughts wandered to Sakura, to the uncertainty that still clouded their future. The promise they had made, to be honest with each other, weighed heavily on his mind. But there was also a sense of calm in knowing that they had acknowledged their fears. Sakura had been distant since their conversation the night before, her eyes avoiding his whenever they crossed paths. It was as if the snow had taken over her, wrapping her in an icy barrier that Haruto couldn't seem to break through. But Haruto had made up his mind. He wouldn't let her carry this burden alone anymore. After class, Haruto made his way to the school courtyard where the snow piled high in small drifts along the edges of the path. He could see Sakura standing by the old tree, staring out at the snow, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. She looked small against the backdrop of the falling snow, lost in her thoughts. Haruto approached her carefully, his footsteps crunching in the snow, but Sakura didn't turn to look at him. He stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to say. He had always found it difficult to express his emotions, but this felt different. Sakura had always been the one to hide her feelings, to bury her pain beneath a layer of stoicism, but now he knew he had to be the one to reach out to her. "The snow's beautiful," Haruto said quietly, trying to break the silence. Sakura didn't answer immediately, but after a long pause, she nodded. "Yeah, it's nice." They stood in silence for a few moments, the cold air swirling around them, the world seeming to slow down in the quiet of the snow-covered courtyard. "Sakura," Haruto began, his voice softer than usual. "I know you're scared, but you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to carry everything on your own." Sakura finally turned to face him, her eyes a little more vulnerable than they had been in the past. "I don't know how to stop," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to let go of all the guilt, of all the pressure I've been carrying for so long." Haruto stepped closer, closing the gap between them. "You don't have to let go all at once. We can take it step by step. But you have to let me help you. I don't want you to carry this burden by yourself." For a long moment, Sakura didn't say anything. Her gaze dropped to the snow beneath her feet, and Haruto could see the conflict in her expression. The weight of her emotions was heavy, and it wasn't easy for her to let anyone in. "I'm scared, Haruto," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm scared that if I let you in, I'll drag you down with me. I don't want to ruin everything." Haruto gently placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her the comfort of his presence. "You don't have to worry about that. I'm here because I want to be. And I'm not going anywhere." Sakura looked up at him, her eyes softening. "But what if I'm not enough for you? What if my past is too much? Then we'll face it together," Haruto said, his voice steady. "You don't have to be perfect. I don't want you to be. I just want you." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Sakura's guarded expression faltered. Slowly, a tear slipped down her cheek, and Haruto didn't hesitate. He reached up to gently wipe it away, his hand lingering on her cheek for just a second longer than necessary. In that moment, it felt like everything between them had shifted. Sakura took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing as if the weight she had been carrying was beginning to lift, just a little. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice quieter now, almost uncertain. "But I know that I want you to be a part of it. I don't want to push you away anymore." Haruto smiled softly, a warmth spreading through his chest. "Then let's take it one step at a time." As the snow continued to fall around them, the world seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them in that moment, standing in the quiet embrace of winter's first snow, the air cold but their hearts warming. Haruto gently took her hand, their fingers intertwining as they stood together in the snow. For the first time in a long while, Sakura allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to trust that someone else would be there to catch her when she fell. And Haruto, for his part, was ready to be there every step of the way. Chapter 12, Akira's Farewell. The end of the semester arrived quicker than either Haruto or Sakura had anticipated. The classroom was buzzing with the anticipation of winter break, but despite the cheerful atmosphere, an unsettling tension lingered in the air. It was hard to ignore the growing distance between Haruto and Sakura and the constant presence of Akira, who seemed determined to stir the pot wherever he went. It was a cold, cloudy day when Akira finally decided to confront Haruto. Haruto sat at his desk, sketching absent-mindedly. The lines of the drawing blurred in front of his eyes as his mind wandered. He wasn't sure why he felt this weight. Was it the unresolved tension between him and Sakura? Was it his own uncertainty about the future? Or was it just the strange sense of foreboding that seemed to hang over him lately? The door to the classroom opened with a sudden crash, and Akira walked in, his usual carefree smile replaced by something darker, more serious. Haruto looked up, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm leaving," Akira announced flatly. Haruto blinked in surprise, not understanding. "Leaving?" "Yeah." Akira's voice was rough, as though the decision hadn't come lightly. "I'm leaving town. My parents want me to transfer somewhere else, and, well, I don't think I'll be back." Sakura's name hung in the air between them, though neither spoke it aloud. Haruto narrowed his eyes, his grip on his pencil tightening. He hadn't expected Akira's departure to happen so suddenly. The rivalry that had been brewing for months now seemed to reach its breaking point. Why? Haruto asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Akira shrugged, his shoulders heavy with some invisible burden. Does it matter? I've already done enough damage. But I've got my reasons. And I won't be here to watch you two play pretend anymore. Haruto clenched his fists at his sides, trying to keep his composure. He wasn't sure if he should be angry at Akira for stirring things up so recklessly, or if he should be grateful for the closure that seemed to be arriving far too late. You think you're helping? Haruto asked, his voice strained. You think your little games are making this easier for her? Akira's eyes flickered, and for the first time there was a hint of guilt in his expression. I never wanted to make things harder, but sometimes I can't sit back and watch her carry all this on her own. You don't get it, do you? Haruto wasn't sure if it was the frustration that made his chest tighten or something else entirely. Then what do you want me to do? I want you to understand what you're up against, Akira said, his voice quiet but filled with the weight of his experience. Sakura isn't just a girl with a perfect life. She's carrying a lot of baggage. Her father, he's gone. She doesn't know how to move on, and she doesn't know how to let you in. You're not the only one who's been fighting her demons. Haruto's heart sank as the pieces began to fall into place. He'd known there were things about Sakura's past that she hadn't shared, but hearing Akira speak of it with such raw honesty made the weight of it all real. The guilt, the grief, it was no wonder Sakura had built so many walls around herself. Akira's gaze softened as he saw the understanding in Haruto's eyes. You're not perfect, Haruto. And neither is she. But if you really care about her, you'll learn to face her darkness. She can't do it alone. Haruto swallowed hard, the words sinking deep into his chest. And you, Akira continued, his tone softer now, almost wistful. You've got to stop running from her. She needs you more than you know. Before Haruto could respond, Akira turned on his heel and walked to the door, pausing with one last glance over his shoulder. Take care of her, he said quietly. She's not as strong as you think. With that, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving an empty silence in the room. Haruto stood there for a moment, absorbing the weight of Akira's words. There was so much more to Sakura's past than he had realized, and now it was clear that he had to face it, no matter how painful it might be. The evening was colder than usual as Haruto made his way to the park where he and Sakura had spent so many quiet moments together. The streetlights cast long shadows on the path, and the distant sound of traffic felt oddly distant, like the world was moving in slow motion. His thoughts were a whirlwind of emotion, but one thing was clear, he couldn't let Sakura carry her pain alone anymore. As he reached the park, he spotted her sitting on their usual bench. She was staring at the ground, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her coat, her face unreadable. Haruto hesitated for a moment, watching her in the quiet stillness of the winter evening. Sakura didn't notice him at first, lost in her thoughts. When she finally looked up, her eyes met his, and for the first time in days, there was a flicker of recognition in them, a silent understanding. Haruto, she said softly, her voice trembling just slightly. What did Akira say to you? Haruto took a deep breath, stepping forward. He said, I need to understand what you're going through. That you can't carry it all alone. Sakura's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she quickly blinked them away. I never wanted to drag you into my mess, Haruto. I don't want to be a burden. Haruto sat down next to her, his hand brushing against hers. You're not a burden, Sakura. But I can't pretend everything's okay when it's not. I want to know you, the real you. The one with all the scars and the pain, not just the perfect image you've built. Sakura looked at him, her lips trembling as she fought to hold back the emotions swirling inside her. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared that if I let you see the real me, you'll walk away. I'm not going anywhere, Haruto said, his voice firm, steady. I'm here for you, Sakura. I always will be. Sakura didn't say anything more. Instead, she leaned her head on his shoulder, the weight of everything finally beginning to lift. The world seemed to pause around them as they sat in the quiet, watching the snow fall softly around them. It wasn't perfect. They still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while, both of them felt like they were no longer facing their struggles alone. Thanks for watching our video. If you find this video interesting, then please subscribe our YouTube channel. If you're watching this video from TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram, then follow our page for more contents like this.